Welcome back to the channel. If you work the graveyard shift, you know that the hours between midnight and dawn can feel like you're living in a different world entirely. The darkness feels heavier, sounds carried differently, and your mind plays tricks on you when you're exhausted. Today, we're diving into 3 bone-chilling true stories from people who experienced something genuinely unexplainable during their late-night shifts. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content we dive into regularly, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Now, let's get into these stories. Our first story comes from Marcus, a security guard who worked the graveyard shift at a mid-sized office building in the Midwest. Marcus had worked nights for 3 years without incident. He was professional, thorough, and took his job seriously. He'd do his rounds every 2 hours, checking doors, monitoring the security cameras, and making sure everything was locked up tight. The building itself was fairly standard, 5 stories, maybe 200 employees during the day, but completely empty by 7 in the evening. One particular night in March, Marcus was sitting at his security desk around 2:47 in the morning when he noticed something strange on one of the monitors. The camera feed from the 3rd floor showed a door that should have been locked, slightly ajar. Marcus checked his records, and that door had definitely been secured during his last round, just 2 hours earlier. He decided to investigate immediately. He grabbed his flashlight and headed up the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the empty building. When Marcus reached the 3rd floor and approached the door in question, it was closed again, completely shut. His heart was already racing, but he told himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the latch hadn't caught properly, or maybe the camera angle had been deceiving. He opened the door and shone his flashlight inside. It was just an empty office space, nothing out of the ordinary. But as he was about to leave, he heard something that made his blood run cold. There was the sound of breathing. Not his own breathing, but something else, something rhythmic and deliberate, coming from somewhere deeper in the office. Marcus immediately backed out of that office and radioed his supervisor. He reported what he'd seen and heard. His supervisor told him to wait in a secure area while he called the police. Police arrived within 15 minutes and did a thorough search of the entire building. They found nothing. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no person hiding anywhere. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. When they reviewed the security footage from the 3rd floor, the timestamp showed that Marcus had never entered that office at all. The camera showed the door opening and closing on its own, with no one visible in the hallway. The breathing sound was never explained, and no intruder was ever found. Marcus quit his job the next day and refused to ever work nights again. Story number 2 takes us to a hospital in Portland. Our narrator is Jennifer, a nurse who worked the graveyard shift in the intensive care unit. Jennifer loved her job and had been working ICU nights for 5 years. She was experienced, compassionate, and knew her patients well. One night in December, Jennifer was making her rounds at 3 in the morning when she noticed something odd about one of her patients. The man in bed 7 had been unconscious for weeks, suffering from severe pneumonia and organ failure. But on this particular night, his eyes were open, and he was staring directly at her. Jennifer approached the bed cautiously. The patient's chart showed no change in his condition. He shouldn't have been conscious, and he definitely shouldn't have been able to move. But he was watching her with an intensity that made her deeply uncomfortable. She tried to speak to him, asking if he could hear her, if he was in pain. He didn't respond, but his eyes never left hers. Then slowly, he raised one arm and pointed directly past Jennifer, toward the corner of the room. Jennifer turned to look at what he was pointing at, but there was nothing there, just a wall and some medical equipment. When she turned back to look at the patient, his arm dropped and his eyes closed. He went completely still. Confused and shaken, Jennifer checked his vitals. Everything was exactly as it had been before the incident. He was still deeply unconscious, still unresponsive to any external stimulus. Jennifer documented what she'd witnessed and mentioned it to the other nurses, but everyone agreed it was probably just an involuntary muscle spasm, something that sometimes happens with patients on life support. The next morning, the patient in bed 7 passed away. At his funeral a week later, Jennifer attended to pay her respects. During the reception, the man's daughter approached her and thanked her for her care during his final days. Jennifer expressed her condolences and mentioned that she'd noticed some unusual activity during the night before he passed. The daughter's face went pale. She told Jennifer that her father had always been terrified of the corner of that hospital room. Years ago, his own father had died in that exact same ICU, in that exact same bed, and he'd always told his family that in his final moments, he saw something in that corner, something dark, something that was waiting for him. Jennifer never worked another night shift after that. Our final story comes from Derek, who worked the night shift at a 24-hour gas station outside of Las Vegas. Derek was a college student working to pay his tuition, and night shifts were perfect for his schedule. The gas station was relatively quiet at night, with only the occasional customer rolling through, usually truckers or insomniacs. The store itself was small and bright, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made the darkness outside seem even more impenetrable. One night in October, around 1:30 in the morning, Derek was restocking shelves when a man entered the store. He was tall, pale, and wore clothes that seemed oddly out of place, old-fashioned, almost like something from decades ago. Derek greeted him with the standard hello, but the man didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he wandered through the store with a strange, jerky gait, moving in an almost mechanical way. Derek watched him with growing unease as the man picked up items and then put them back, picked them up again, and put them back once more. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, the man approached the counter with a single item in his hand, a pack of old-style cigarettes that Derek didn't even remember the store carrying. Derek looked at the pack, then at the man, and felt a wave of cold fear wash over him. The man's face was completely expressionless, his eyes empty, and when Derek looked closer, he realized the man wasn't blinking, not once. Derek asked how the man wanted to pay, and the stranger reached for his wallet.